So John has a lot of different ways that it can try to generate the guesses to see if it can find a match for these hashes that we're trying to crack. And we're going to call these the modes. That's what John calls them. The mode of operation determines how the guesses are going to be made. So there's essentially more or less 6 modes. You could kind of argue maybe a couple of these could be combined together, but essentially we can break it up into 6 modes and talk about it pretty reasonably. We've already looked at the default mode in our lab where we were trying to crack the 6 hashes for usernames, user 1 through 6. And that default mode is really a pseudo mode or a meta mode, however you want to say it. It's really the single crack mode, the word list mode, and the incremental mode run back to back to back automatically. Of course, the word list is just the password.lst. It's not a very big word list. It's the one that comes with John. So there are better word lists out there that have more words in them. So we'll start with the default mode. First things first, is this going to do the single crack rule? This is a rule that's in the conf file, which contains the other rules. These rules are ways of mangling words. You might have a very simple rule. The letter C, for example, is a rule, and it capitalizes the word. There's another rule, U. It uppercases the word. There's a rule, colon, that just takes the word as it is. Doesn't do anything to it. It's like the null rule, if you will. It just says, just try the word like it already is in the list. So these rules can be stored in a collection of rules we can give a name to, like the single rule, meaning it's the collection of rules with the label single. And John has a rule built in called single. So it'll use that rule to mangle the username in the geckos fields, the first name and the last name, and the office number if it's in there, that kind of stuff, to generate guesses. For the word list mode, it uses the password.lst file, and it uses the word list rules. These are rules that are under the label word list. And then finally, if none of that works, it'll try the incremental mode, which is kind of like a smart brute force. It's not exactly brute force. John uses trigrams, triples of letters instead of pairs of letters, triples of letters that are commonly found together, combining them in kind of a smart way to make guesses. You can take a look at this if we go back over to the John directory. So if I cd into opt, capital J, John the Ripper, and run, and if I use gedit to open up john.conf, sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to make the font bigger. So inside this conf file, there's going to be all kinds of different rules. And as an example, if you search for the word single, capital S, there's the single rule. And it has all kinds of mangling rules underneath of it. The very first rule that the single rule uses, or group uses, is this colon, which just means just take it as it is. And then it starts to say things, well, if it's not capitalized, then try to do these different things to it, try to mangle it in these different ways. This stuff's pretty hard to read. They do have really good documentation on the John website about what all these funny little symbols and stuff mean and do. But the basic ones are not too bad, and we'll take a look at starting to write our own rules here later, and we'll be able to do uppercase and capital adds, and we'll be able to add things onto the end of a word and things onto the beginning of a word and combine them together and do some things like that. So some of these symbols, don't worry about it right now. They'll make a little bit more sense by the end of the day. So that's the single rules. And you can see here that rules can be stored in other files, like there's the file called jumbo single, and you can include the jumbo single rules. You can store them in the same file or a different file. You can refer to other files to keep the rules separate. And there's all kinds of rules in here that it'll try. So down here is the word list rules, the rules I talked about for the second type of cracking. So again, try the words as they are. Lowercase it if it's an alphanumeric word. Lowercase it and append a 1 onto the end. Double the word up. Put a 1 in front of the word, and so on and so forth. So again, these are built into John by default. Right. So the next mode is the first mode run in the default mode, and that's the single crack mode. The single crack mode, again, it's using the information about the user as the word list. So in this example here on the screen, this is a type 6 hash taken from an Ubuntu system. It's in the Linux hash format, and the username was Ricky, so it would try running those the single crack rules on the name Ricky. And we can kind of simulate this and sort of watch what John's doing. It's a really good idea to make sure that you always include as much information as you can when you're creating the hash format, and allow John to use that information to make guesses. So if you kind of want to simulate what John is doing, I'm going to close out the gedit window here. I'm still in the run directory, so I can just say /John because it's in the directory I'm in right now. There's a feature called standard out that instead of actually trying to crack any kind of passwords, it just sends the guesses out to standard out, which is the monitor. So it just prints them on the screen. So I'm going to put that word Ricky into a file. We can use that echo trick from earlier. And I'm going to put that into temp dictionary. So now that word is in a file that I can refer to. And I can use that standard out feature to simulate how the single crack mode works. So first things first, does anybody remember the name of the rule that was inside of the John file for the single crack mode? It was single. So, all right. So the word list, -- word list that I put the word into, sorry, I put temp Ricky, it was temp dictionary. And the rule was single. And -- stdout is standard out. And it just runs that word, that one word, just the one word Ricky, through the rules. So again, it was John -- word list equals temp / dictionary, or whatever you called your file, -- rules with an S equals single. That was the name of the rule in the file we looked at inside of the config. And then -- stdout standard out. I can pipe this to less program. The less program will let you scroll up and down in this giant list of output. So you can use the arrow key to kind of look through the list with the less program. And you can sort of see the mangles that are going on. So you can see the letters of the alphabet are getting added to the end of the name. Some symbols are getting added to the end of the name. Capitalize the name and then put letters and numbers on the end and symbols on the end. Uppercase it, do the same. Right. So you get the idea, right, of how the mangling works. And you also know how to simulate John's output, which is going to come in oh so handy when you write your own rules. It's kind of a precursor. All right. In the unshadowed format, we get more information. Awesome. More information is better. So in addition to the name of the person, with the unshadowed format, we get that gecko's information, their office or name or whatever is in the field. It could be it's just text, but it can be just about anything. And John will use all those words to try to make guesses. And then you have their home directory. So as an example of trying to crack something in single mode, let's just say, for example, we had something that was encrypted with the SHA-512 crypt algorithm, which is Linux's Type 6 algorithm, Ubuntu's default algorithm. We had it in the unshadowed format, and it was in temp hashes. Then we could run John and try to crack that hash with a word list using the single mode. Or we could just say -- single and tell John, hey, you do your thing. You do your single mode thing. I don't want to have to type in all this extra information about the word list and stuff. I'll just use -- single to trigger this mode. We already saw that if you just don't do anything but type in John and the name of the file, it'll automatically assume you wanted to try the single mode first, and it's as if you typed in -- single and ran it. But it's just automatic. But if you want to trigger just the single mode and you don't want to run the other two default modes back to back to back, the -- single is how you tell it only do this mode, don't do the other two default modes. All right, so I'm going to take, just as a demo, I'm going to take this and put it into a file. So I'm going to gedit temp hash and paste, oops, I don't think I copied it all the way. So you copy, save, and this is called temp hash. So I'm going to say John -- single just for demo purposes. Temp hash and the format. It'll get the format. I think I spent all morning saying you have to tell it the format. It's not always true. I'll explain why in a minute. And it says, okay, I got it. Now I can use the show. Okay, and it'll show that the password was Ricky1. All right, why didn't I have to tell it the format of the type 6 hash? Yeah, technically speaking, the second field, the field's being delimited by these $, has a 6, just a 6 in it. That's the type of password field in this hash expression format, this Linux hash expression format. The second field is the type of the hash. John just read, oh, it's a type 6 hash, which is SHA-512 crypt, and I didn't have to type it all out.